This week on The Watchman, we're in Jerusalem with an all-star panel discussing the shared threats and opportunities that lie ahead for America and Israel.
Israel, in many respects, has been the largest American aircraft carrier which cannot be sunk and is deployed in a critical area for America's national security.
An in-depth look at a crucial alliance with two leading Middle East analysts. It's The Watchman. It's Christians United for Israel, only on TBN. And welcome to The Watchman from TBN's Jerusalem studio. You know, folks, there are certain themes that we like to hit here at Christians United for Israel and on The Watchman show on a regular basis. Number one, Israel is the first line of defense for Western civilization, and if Israel goes down, we all go down. Number two, Israel's enemies are America's enemies, and the same radical forces that seek to wipe Israel off the map also have a bullseye on the back of the United States and every American. And number three, the U.S.-Israel relationship is strong. It's essential for both countries, and it is irreplaceable. These are very important themes, folks, to understand, and that's why we are so privileged today to have two great guests who specialize not only in the U.S.-Israel relationship, but the shared threats and opportunities that our two countries have together. Yoram Ettinger is an expert on the U.S.-Israel relationship and a former Israeli ambassador who spent a good deal of time in the United States. And Chris Mitchell is a veteran journalist who's been based here in Jerusalem for 16 years as the Middle East Bureau Chief for CBN News. He's also author of a great new book called ISIS, Iran, and Israel. Both men are good friends of Christians United for Israel. And folks, when you get two guests that are this good, you gotta give them a whole show. So today, Chris and Yoram form a Watchman all-star panel, and I think you're really gonna enjoy their insights and their warnings about not only the threats gathering against America and Israel, but why our two countries need to keep that irreplaceable bond and why every Christian should stand with the Jewish state. It's Yoram Ettinger and Chris Mitchell today on The Watchman with Christians United for Israel. Take a look. Well, Yoram, Chris, welcome to The Watchman.
Thank you.
Great to have you here in sunny, beautiful Jerusalem. Quite a view here.
Amazing.
Well, Chris, you had a different view recently. You just came back from Brussels. I think that's a great place to start. Obviously, we're in the wake of this horrific terror attack carried out by ISIS in Brussels. What did you learn on the ground there?
Well, I learned that, just a few guys can really upset a whole city and actually shake a whole continent right now. These guys came from a place called Molenbeek, which is sort of the jihad capital of Europe. I mean, that's what they call Brussels. And these guys have not only been involved in the Brussels attack, but the Paris attack, the Charlie Hebdo attack. And we talked to a counterterrorism expert there who said there are 7,000 to 10,000 jihadists like that throughout Europe, and 5,000 more that support them. So this is a massive threat to Europe. It was right there in the heart of Europe, right just a few blocks from the European Union capital. And it's really a major threat to Europe.
Chris, stunning, and a threat to America as well, because Western Europeans can enter the United States without a visa.
That's right.
And we have this pipeline of Westerners going to join ISIS. I think it's great that we have you guys in particular on this panel today. Chris, you're an American journalist living here in Jerusalem. Yoram, you were a diplomat in America. You spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill. Speaking of terror, I think that's a great segue, Yoram. What is Israel doing? Israel's doing so many things. It's on the cutting edge in the fight against Islamic terror. But what are some of the ways that Israel's technology, its innovations in the war on terror are helping America?
Well, for instance, FBI just hacked the cellular phone of the San Bernardino terrorist using most advanced recent Israeli hacking technology. If you were to talk to the chairman of the Intelligence Committee in the Senate or in the House, they would tell you that the scope of intelligence which the U.S. receives from Israel exceeds that which the US receives from all NATO countries combined, focusing especially on Islamic terrorist attacks, potential attacks against American targets abroad and on the mainland. Israel maintains intelligence presence throughout the Middle East. We blend very easily into any Muslim country, any Arab country, due to the demography of Israel, which is very difficult, next to impossible, for Americans coming from a totally different demographic background. As a result, we have been a source of vital homeland security information, national security information for the US when it comes to Islamic terrorists active in Egypt or Jordan or Saudi Arabia. And that has led to a dramatic security cooperation between Israel and America's Arab allies. Right. In a very real sense, Israel has extended the strategic hand of the USA into the Middle East in a way which the US on its own would not be able to do. And that's obviously in addition for Israel being at this stage the most cost-effective, the most battle-tested laboratory of the American defense industry. We are employing right now a few hundred American military systems. Each one of them we operate on battle turf conditions, and as a result, we provide those hundreds of manufacturers in the US with real-time online lessons regarding the operation, maintenance, and repairs of those systems, which enhance the quality of the future American military defense products.
Yoram, I'm so glad you're sharing this information, because folks, a lot of times we're hearing people, some on Capitol Hill, saying we should cut all aid to Israel, but it's so much deeper than that. Israel is a net benefit to the United States in so many ways, as you just described. And Chris, talking about the innovations against terror that Israel is making, that Yoram just laid out, what can America learn? Look, you're a journalist living here in Jerusalem. You've been here for 16 years, based in Israel. You've seen a lot, intifadas, terror waves here. This latest terror wave, this so-called stabbing intifada, it seems that they're kind of using the ISIS blueprint in a sense, these lone wolf, homegrown type attacks. So Chris, how is Israel countering this latest wave of terror? What have you seen covering this on the ground?
Well, I saw this 5 weeks after we arrived here in August of 2000. I lived just a few blocks away from here, and then went through the 3.5 years, maybe 4 years of the second intifada. Now we're going through what's called the stabbing intifada. I think what I would share with the American people is the fact how resilient the Israeli people have been through this. They've really been on the front lines of the war on terror, maybe even before the founding of the State of Israel. And so they have stood firm. And I think Americans need to realize that we're in the same kind of war. As you've said many times, Israel is the little Satan, but America is the great Satan. And I think people need to understand that we are in this war. That's what ISIS has declared, Al-Qaeda has declared, even Iran has declared war against the United States. And so I think that's the important thing. Why I wrote the book, ISIS, Iran, and Israel, I think that's number one thing I want to make people aware of in the United States is we are in this war. And there are different ways that it can be fought. Israel's the world leader in counterterrorism.
Yoram, look, Israel is the first line of defense for Western civilization. Talk about why Israel is so vital from a security standpoint. For the average American watching who may not realize, Israel's only the size of the state of New Jersey, but Israel is such a bulwark against this wave of terror that Chris described, Iran, ISIS. Talk about how Israel, in many ways, is all that's holding back the wolves of jihad from coming to the West.
Well, the Middle East is extremely vital as far as global economy is concerned, but mostly as far as the battle on terrorism and some economic considerations. If there wouldn't be Israel in the Middle East, the US would have to dispatch significantly more naval presence, air force presence, and ground presence, more military divisions, more aircraft carriers, which would have cost the American taxpayers some $15 or maybe $20 billion every single year. Instead, there is a Jewish state on the eastern flank of the Mediterranean, which constitutes a very powerful posture of deterrence on the side of the US against Islamic terrorism and other rogue regimes, which bolsters the homeland and national security of America's Arab allies, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and extends the strategic arm of the USA. Israel, in many respects, has been the largest American aircraft carrier, which cannot be sunk and is deployed in a critical area for America's national security.
Yoram, I think that's a great place to leave it, folks. We're going to the break. Much more coming up with Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, Chris Mitchell, author of ISIS, Iran, and Israel, and the EttingerReport.com, by the way, Yoram's website. He's got a great series of YouTube clips out as well that you need to check out. Much more coming up. It's the Watchman. It's Christians United for Israel, only right here on TBN. Stick around.
On nearly every border, Israel is surrounded by enemies that seek its destruction. Vicious terror groups like ISIS, Hezbollah, and Hamas are acquiring deadlier and more advanced weapons as Iran moves ever closer to a nuclear bomb. At the UN, the international community shuns Israel. On college campuses, Jewish students are harassed and intimidated. God's chosen people are facing an all-out assault. As a Christian, how will you answer God if you choose to do nothing? It's time for Christians to take a stand. Join CUFI, America's largest pro-Israel organization, where 3 million Christians across the United States are working together to defend Israel in our classrooms, churches, and communities. From college campuses to Capitol Hill, CUFI is making a difference and fighting for Israel. Visit our website, cufi.org, and join the movement for such a time as this.
And welcome back to the Watchman here on TBN. We're talking to Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, Chris Mitchell of CBN News. Chris, your book is called ISIS, Iran, and Israel. To my mind, ISIS and Iran are really the twin threats right now to the West and to Israel. The radical Shia, radical Sunni movements, they're kind of the head of each. Talk about this Iran threat. You know, you've covered it so much as a journalist here over the past few years. In the wake of this Iran deal, which I believe is a disastrous deal for Israel, for America, for the West, what's the sense now on the ground in Israel?
I would think that the sense right now is that the battle has gone to a different stage. I mean, maybe they lost the diplomatic battle of this, what some people call the worst diplomatic agreement in U.S. history, which I would agree with that analysis. But now the issue is, how do we contain Iran? How do we prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon? That's the number one goal, I believe, and the number one threat against Israel and perhaps the United States and the rest of the free world. So I think it's gone to a new stage right now, and I think people need to heed the warnings of people like Senator Tom Cotton, who we interviewed here in the King David Hotel, where he said he believes that this is going to set up nuclear tripwires throughout the Middle East. Right now we have rhetoric expanding by Saudi Arabia, the Sunni sort of giant in the Middle East, against Iran. And so now Saudi Arabia is going to want to try to get a nuclear weapon. So I think it's going to lead to nuclear proliferation and probably an existential threat throughout the region. This is going to lead to perhaps something we haven't seen in our lifetime.
Folks, if you think the Middle East is chaotic now, imagine a nuclear arms race in the most volatile region in the world. Yoram, as this Iran deal was being discussed and debated on Capitol Hill, you were there. You were talking to members of Congress. What's your sense now in Washington, D.C., in terms of the Obama administration going forward? They seem very committed to this Iran deal.
The underlying misperception by the Obama administration has been that Iran is a major threat to Israel rather than to the USA, while in fact the reality is that Iran does not develop nuclear capabilities in order to hit Israel. They develop those capabilities in order to advance their mega goal, which has to do with domination of the Persian Gulf, the Middle East, Muslim world, and beyond. Israel is not a player in that context. In order to advance the mega goal, they have to do away with the mega obstacle. And the mega obstacle is the big Satan, the USA, not the little Satan, Israel. The Iranian machete is approaching the American throat. because Iran could do away with all pro-American Arab countries in the Middle East. Iran is the major tailwind behind Islamic terrorism, which is already operating on the American mainland. Iran is a twin sister of North Korea, and together they develop anti-American capabilities. Iran is a major ally of Venezuela, which is a major thorn in the back of the U.S. Iran is getting deeper and deeper into Mexico, which is already homeland security of America. And Iran is a systematic violator of all international agreements. The fact that they signed an agreement on a piece of paper means absolutely nothing when you examine the track record of Iran as non-compliant with agreements. And last and not least, hate America has been an underlying element in Iranians' school education, K through 12. And therefore, minimally, that agreement should have suggested a rollback of sanctions against Iran, depending on rollback of anti-American hate education, and that is a major, major flaw of that agreement with Iran.
There are so many flaws in this deal, as you said. And by the way, you also made a great point that America is the ultimate target. There's a reason Iran is developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, that could conceivably one day reach the United States. That's not that they're meant for the great Satan, not the little Satan. Iran already has missiles that can reach all of Israel, Chris. And Iran also has a very powerful proxy at Israel's northern doorstep called Hezbollah. Now, you covered the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah. Do you get a sense that another war may be brewing around the corner between Israel and Hezbollah, God forbid, sometime in the near future?
That could be. It's almost 10 years now since that second Lebanon war. Now, one thing about the Iran deal, right now the budget for Iran focusing on Hezbollah is about $1 billion. With the Iran deal, they have lifted sanctions. They have opened up Iran's economy to the world. It's going to be a bonanza for them. So if they take that $1 billion and increase it to $2 billion to Hezbollah, what's that going to mean for Israel? $3 billion or $5 billion or $10 billion. So this is really going to be, as Urim would say, a tailwind for terror here in the Middle East. And not only that, you would expect after this agreement for Iran's rhetoric to tone down. If anything, it's really ratcheted up. Just one example is when Iran captured American U.S. sailors in the Persian Gulf.
An embarrassment.
They use that as a propaganda tool. And that's, I think, emblematic. That sort of tells you what kind of regime we're dealing with.
Yeah, this is a regime that has not changed its spots and moderated, regardless of the fervent hopes of Western leaders. And we here at Christians United for Israel, folks, we fought this Iran nuclear deal tooth and nail. So join with us, join the movement as we sound the alarm about this Iran threat, Hezbollah, and many more. Well, coming up after the break, more with Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, Chris Mitchell of CBN News, author of ISIS, Iran, and Israel. And check out the EttingerReport.com as well. It's the Watchman, it's Kufi, only right here on TBN. Don't move.
Israel's fight is our fight. We are one. We are united. We will not be discouraged. We will not be defeated. We will not be intimidated. We will not sit down. We will not be silent. We are the worst nightmare of the anti-Semites of the world. The victory is going to be ours.
Join the largest pro-Israel organization in the U.S. for the 2016 Kufi Summit in Washington, D.C., July 18th and 19th. You will hear numerous experts and have an opportunity to meet face-to-face with your government representatives and express your support for Israel. Visit our website, cufi.org, and register today for the 2016 Kufi Summit in Washington, D.C.
And welcome back to the Watchman here at TBN's Jerusalem studio. Not a bad view, gentlemen. Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, Chris Mitchell, author of ISIS, Iran, and Israel, the blockbuster new book. Well, guys, we're talking about the Iran threat. We're talking about ISIS and terror and the shared threats that America and Israel are facing. The great Satan and the little Satan, their words, not ours, obviously. And Yoram, I think that's one of the reasons it's great that we have you today. You were a diplomat, an ambassador based in the United States for many years. You're still on Capitol Hill on a regular basis, meeting with members of Congress. This America-Israel relationship, in the view of many people under the Obama administration, has been sort of frayed at the highest levels. But before the interview, we were talking about how support for Israel remains rock solid on Capitol Hill. Why is that so important?
Well, according to the American political system, U.S.-Israel relations do not hinge on the identity of the American president, but most importantly, on the state of mind of the American people and their own representatives on Capitol Hill. The power of Congress is actually co-equal and co-determining to the American president or the executive. And when it comes to the current mood in America, with very, very deep polarization, there are very few issues of common denominator. The support of Israel is one of the issues which unites most Americans on the Hill and throughout America. And the foundations of the American support for Israel is not Israel's national security achievements, is not Israel being the startup nation. The foundation goes back to the Mayflower and the Arabella 400 years ago, Judeo-Christian values, which guided the early pilgrims, which guided the founding fathers, and which have helped shaping the American Constitution and the American state of mind. That's the secret of the very special covenant between the U.S. and Israel.
You're such a historian of that U.S.-Israel relationship, and the relationship between the Jewish people and the United States, as you said, goes back hundreds of years. Chris, as an American evangelical, originally from the United States, you've been here in Jerusalem for 16 years. Christians, obviously, American evangelicals, are a major source of support for Israel. Do you get a sense, you're in these circles all the time, obviously, do you get a sense that that support is growing? I know there's been some concern, actually, that maybe a pro-Palestinian or replacement theology narrative has been creeping in to American Christian communities. What's your sense?
Well, my sense is that actually it's growing, but there is that undercurrent, I guess, of pro-Palestinian kind of sentiment. It's taken different forms right now, but I think when we came here in 2000, we saw the Intifada began, and tourism fell dramatically. The one group of people that kept coming were evangelical Christians. And I think Israelis saw that. And I think, to me, that was sort of one of the beginnings of this relationship that's exemplified by Kufi and other groups. You have Christians standing with Yad Vashem, Christians with Magen David Adom. I think this movement is growing and growing. And I would say, too, and one of the things I wrote about in the book is the fact that ISIS, Iran, and others have been persecuting Christians. The one country in the Middle East that really is a refuge for Christians is here in Israel.
Great
and
point.
Father Nadaf, a friend of ours, I think we all know.
He's been on the show.
He has been on the show, and he's been saying that as well. And I think that people need to know, American Christians need to know that their brothers and sisters are being persecuted like never before. It really is a genocide against minorities here in the Middle East, like Christians and Yazidis. They need to pray for them and stand with them. That's part of the reason I wrote the book. But they need to realize that Israel is a refuge for Christians and Christianity.
That's right. You know, folks, again, the enemies of the Jewish people are the enemies of Christians as well. We saw the Jewish people chased out of Arab and Muslim lands during the 1930s, 40s, 50s. Now history is repeating itself, and Christians are being chased out of lands like Iraq, Syria, where they've been for thousands and thousands of years. Just another reason to stand with Israel, stand with the Jewish people. Well, some final thoughts after the break with Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, Chris Mitchell. Stick around.
Centuries-old churches and monasteries burnt to the ground, Christian villages ransacked, women and children enslaved, and believers in Jesus led to their deaths. ISIS has declared an all-out war on Christians. Believers in the Middle East outside of Israel are suffering horrible persecution. Christians united for Israel will not remain silent as Islamic extremists carry out a genocide against our brothers and sisters in Christ. On Capitol Hill, Kufi is working hard to ensure America's allies receive the aid they need to defeat ISIS. Kufi is leading a Raise Your Voice campaign to bring the issue front and center for Christians across America. Visit our website, CUFI.org to find out how you can stand with CUFI as we stand up for the persecuted church. If not us, who? And if not now, when?
And welcome back to the Watchman from TBN's Jerusalem studio with Christians United for Israel. We're wrapping up here with Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, Chris Mitchell. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Fascinating conversation. You made some excellent points that an American audience in particular needs to know. Okay, final thoughts here. We're short on time. Some final observations, Yoram.
Well, my final thought is that America should learn from the grave mistakes committed by Europeans when it comes to confronting Islamic terrorism, not by repeating European mistakes, but by refraining from European mistakes. And first and foremost is to realize leopards do not change spots. They do change tactics, but not spots.
Chris, any final thoughts, any encouraging thoughts that you have as we go forward?
People need to know that we are at war with radical Islam, whether it's ISIS or Iran, and we need to know our enemy. Sometimes that's not very stated with our leaders right now, but we need to know our enemy. And the other thought I would have is for Christians in America, stand with their brothers and sisters here in the Middle East. They're under persecution. Their lives have been changed, perhaps forever. Pray for them, support them, do what you can to help them.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect, Chris. And we hit so many major points today, gentlemen. Look, terrorism is only a tactic. It is driven by an ideology. It's radical Islamic ideology. Israel's the first line of defense for Western civilization. The U.S.-Israel relationship remains strong. Israel is a vital strategic asset for the United States. I think we hit it all, but we'll do it again soon, right here at TBN's Jerusalem studio. That's it for this week. Here from Christians United for Israel, the Watchman. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.